We're going to break down Texas A&M's defense, and I'll tell you this unit is ready to take the SEC by storm.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to break down the Texas A&M defense on today's episode of Locked On Aggies. I hope you all enjoyed those crossovers we had last week. And got a show coming for you today, and then I'll be back Wednesday evening, and we'll have shows coming at you on Thursday and Friday. Hope everybody's had a great couple of days while I've been out of town. I'll be checking up with everything and seeing what's going on, but hope everybody's doing well. But let's get right into this with the Texas A&M secondary. It is no surprise that last year Texas A&M's secondary was rather concerning, for lack of better words. I mean, the secondary was very bad last year. Texas A&M, time after time after time, would get burned with deep passes, with the deep ball. The deep ball was really what got the Aggies more times than not, was the deep ball. And, looking at how what I have loved about the Coach Elko era thus far is that there was a problem and he immediately found the solution. There's nothing worse, and I say this all the time, but it's true. I mean, nothing grinds my gears more than a coach who doesn't do a very good job of filling needs in the transfer portal. That is what the transfer portal is there for. You are supposed to go and get players to help your roster. That is what the goal is. You are going to get players to make your roster better from what you previously struggled with or what you might need because of players leaving for the NFL, whatever it is. You fill holes. Coach Elko, watched the bowl game, did all this, and he looked at himself and went, man, we have got to figure out the secondary in the transfer portal. And what does he go and do? He absolutely knocks the secondary out of the ballpark in the transfer portal. What he did, bringing in all of those talented players from the transfer portal in the secondary, I think it was so important. I think looking at this team as a whole, you have to feel really good about how much it got better thanks to the improvements Coach Elko made to the secondary. I mean, we haven't seen it, obviously. We haven't seen this secondary play a football game yet because this team hasn't played a game yet besides the spring game. But, there's no way this unit can be worse bringing in all this talent, bringing in a Will Lee, bringing in a Des Ricks, a player with a ton of upside. I mean, you can't look at this secondary room and not be excited. It gets me fired up because, once again, I have to reiterate this time and time again. Nothing frustrates me more than a coach not filling holes in the portal. Coach Elko did that and some with this Texas A&M secondary. This secondary is now in such a good position. I think that it moved, for example, moving Bryce Anderson back to secondary, back to the safety, getting Tariq Chappelle to come back. I mean, everything that's happened in this secondary, I think, has been great. You bring back the players that were pretty good last year, and then you go in the portal and land veterans that have played a lot of snaps, some young guys with high upside, and you got the guys that were freshmen last year that played some snaps, a Javon Thomas, for example, that maybe they weren't great last year as freshmen, but they've developed and they're getting better. I do think this unit as a whole is going to go from bad to good, just like that, thanks to development, portal additions, and just better all-around coaching. So, I do feel really good about this Texas A&M secondary now, thanks to all of the different additions. I think it's going to end up being one of the better units on the team. And it's funny because if you would have asked me that 5 months ago, you just said, Andrew, what's your confidence going to be heading into the season for the secondary? I'd have been like, well, it's probably, we'll see. I don't know. I need to see it happen. Now I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be a good unit. Now, once again, still got to prove it. I can sit here and talk about the secondary all day. I can sit here and say, hey, the secondary is going to be better. Coach Elko did a great job in the portal. Well, I believe all that to be true, and I do think that it will end up being a reality. It still has to happen, has to come to fruition. You have to see this secondary that is full of a ton of transfers, a ton of players that we believe are going to be really good. They've still got to do it. So, I can't sit here and act like it is a lock that this secondary is going to be elite. It's a lock that this secondary is going to be one of the better, going to be one of the better units on this team, because it's not. It's still a question mark. You can't look at this unit and not go, okay, it still is a question mark, because it is. But the upside is there. And that's what matters. So I'm excited about this unit. I think it's going to click. I think it's going to end up being one of the better units on this team. So moving on to the defensive line. The defensive line, I think it needs no introduction. We know what Texas A&M's defensive line did last year. Obviously, you lose Jackson to the NFL with the Bengals now, and you lose Walter Nolan to Ole Miss in the portal. You lose some players. You lose Fadil Diggs. You lose a ton of guys, but you also bring in some players. You bring in a Cassius Howell, and you bring in a Nic Scourton. And those are players that I think are going to, well, obviously Nic Scourton. I mean, y'all know my take on Nic Scourton. I think he has a legit chance to be the best defender potentially in the SEC. That's how good he is. I mean, it's one of those, if you disagree, turn on film and tell me why. He is an elite player. And he's also got, like, Cassius Howell comes to Texas A&M after a year with a ton of sacks. But he did that at Bowling Green. Is that going to transfer over to the SEC? We believe it. We believe he's going to be a great player. But it needs to be proven. And that is what we need to see. Is he going to end up being as good as we think he can be? That's what has to be proven. I think he's going to be a great player. This is Cassius Howell, but he's got to prove it. When it comes to Nic Scourton, he comes over from the Big Ten. He has already proven in one of the best conferences in college football that he can produce, he can get sacks, he can put up double-digit sacks, and he's going to get a lot of attention at Texas A&M when it comes to opposing offenses, but all it does, okay, if they're double teaming Scourton, it's just going to give, Shamar Turner and Shamar Stewart and DJ Hicks and some of these other talented defensive linemen more opportunities. Cassius Howell coming off the other side, whoever it is, more opportunities to get after the quarterback. And that is what should be exciting for Texas A&M fans. Is I think that, this is a unit and it's a deep Texas A&M defensive line room. This unit is super deep, and that's exciting. It's important. You want to have a unit that is deep. You want to have a unit that has enough players. That you want to have a unit that has enough guys. And I do believe that this Texas A&M defensive line has that. It's deep. It's top to bottom, it's deep and elite. It's one of those positions where you could lose some players when it comes to the portal. When it comes to injury, and still be extremely talented. That's how good this Texas A&M defensive line is going to be this year, as it was last year. I think this unit has a legit chance to repeat as the sack champion in the SEC. Now, obviously, linebackers and some of the secondary players will help with that. But the defensive line is going to be getting a lot of pressure. I think Nic Scourton, Cassius Howell, they're going to get a lot of pressure. Hopefully, you can get some pressure from some of your defensive tackles as well. But it's going to be a really interesting season for the defensive line, because I think it's going to be just as good as it was last year. So we need to see it proven. Once again, I can sit here and say things. I can make claims. But at the end of the day, these players, this Texas A&M defensive line needs to go out there and prove it. So We need to see that happen. I believe it's going to happen, but it needs to happen. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm a believer in this team, in this unit, so we'll see how it goes. But Texas A&M's defensive line should be one of the better defensive lines in all of college football this season. Now we're going to get into the linebacker room. The linebacker room is another unit. You feel good about one of the spots there. You feel good about the upside. But is it all going to come together because you need multiple? We'll have that conversation coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the best place to go buy tickets to literally anything. If you want a ticket to a sporting event, to a concert, to theater, to literally anything you're buying a ticket to, you should be doing it on Game Time. It's what I use to buy every ticket to everywhere I go. I'm always buying my tickets on Game Time. Y'all should be doing the same. I love the app. It's easy to use. I love how on the Game Time app, you can see what your seat looks like, which is so nice. You know where you're going to be sitting before you even get to the venue. I love that. You got to go check out the Game Time app. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So, moving on to talking about this linebacker room. This Texas A&M linebacker room is going to be a really interesting one because we feel really good about Terrion York. Terrion York is a player who I think is going to be one of the better linebackers in the SEC this year. Still, every time I talk about Terrion York, I have to talk about how amazing it is that he was a true freshman last year, had an incredible season. Now he's a sophomore and he is a captain on this team. I mean, that is all around incredible to be able to do that, to be able to become a captain after 1 year on campus. This is your second year. That's incredible. You just don't see that happen a lot in college football. Normally it's the juniors and the seniors that are captains on the team. It says a lot about him, who he is as a person, who he is as a player, but he's going to be great. He'll be one of the best linebackers in the SEC this year. I'm really excited to see his development from freshman to sophomore year. But then the question mark around, and I think one of the most interesting question marks on this entire roster, who ends up being the linebacker 2? Is it going to be Scooby Williams? Is it going to be Sanford? Is it going to be DeShields? Who is going to be the backup? When I say back, I mean the second linebacker on this unit. That's going to be really interesting. And then the other concern here is depth. So you have a lot of freshmen in this room. You also have, some of those guys like a Sanford. He's a great example of guys who maybe they have that upside. Could they put it all together this year? And then you've got, obviously, Terrion York, we know is going to be great. And then the transfers, you got Scooby Williams, and then you've got DeShields as well. So what do they end up doing? I think that DeShields from Pitt is going to end up winning this job. For a while, I thought it was going to be Scooby Williams, even after DeShields committed to Texas A&M. But then the more, digging I did on him as a player and more film I watched, and I went, okay, I think it's DeShields is to lose. Now, I do like that Scooby Williams played in the SEC, but once again, DeShields was in the ACC. It's not like he's coming from a super small conference. He's a really good player, veteran with a lot of upside. Scooby Williams, I think the higher ceiling is Scooby Williams. The better floor is DeShields. Scooby Williams, he was a super highly ranked guy out of high school. And I think he's a guy that has that upside. I think it could all come together. But, I think DeShields is the guy that if you just want a linebacker that's going to go out there, he's going to be a sound tackler, he's going to do what he needs to do, and he's going to help your football team, I think DeShields is the right person to have start for this team. I just think that's the decision you have to make. But still, looking at this team at this unit as a whole, the depth is my number one concern. I do think whether it's Scooby Williams or the Shields, whoever you end up playing as your second linebacker is going to be fine. I think they're going to get the job done. My concern then is if someone goes down with injury. If Terrion York goes down with an injury, I do then get very concerned quickly about this Texas A&M linebacker room. I quickly get worried about this unit as a whole because I think they're going to be fine. I think they're going to be good, but the depth is where it gets really, really scary. So that's my thoughts on the linebacker room. And then let me know in the YouTube comments, like, do y'all have confidence in the depth of this linebacker room? Because I sure don't, when it comes to depth. Once again, because if all these freshmen were sophomores this year instead of freshmen, I'd feel great about this room. I just think, not every player is going to be at Terrion York where they come right on into campus and are incredible. It's not going to happen for everybody. So, that is where I get concerned with these. That's where I get a little bit concerned with these, this unit as a whole is that depth piece. So that's my concern. And then, when it comes to Coach Elko and Coach Bateman, how's that dynamic going to work? I mean, I think it's going to be like, is Coach Elko game planning? Are they game planning together? I think that they are two. I know not everybody loves the Bateman hire. I'll be honest with you. It matters. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but just knowing that the defensive mind that Coach Elko is, I'm really not all that concerned about Bateman. I'm just not. I just think that this is going to be Coach Elko's defense. I think he's going to be coaching this team up. Yes. Does he have a little bit of focus on recruiting? Is he going to have obviously in-game focus on stuff like, do I go for it on fourth? Do I kick the field goal here? What do I do? Like, yes, those thoughts are going to be there. But at the end of the day, I still think that the dynamic between these two is going to be solid. It's not going to be what we saw last year on the offensive side of the ball with Coach Fisher and his OC. It's not going to be like that. I think you're going to see this work really well. I think this defensive coaching staff is great. And I think you're going to see the Aggies have a really solid defense this year, and I can't wait to see it. Now, the last question, conversation here before we move on to something different is, will Texas A&M have a top 10 defense in college football? And, a lot of people I think would be quick to laugh. I think people would be quick to laugh at this. And that's fair. I get it. But I'm telling you, I do believe there is a world where Texas A&M's defense is top 10 in college football. I think knowing the upgrades you made in the secondary, Terrion York, Nic Scourton, Shamar Turner, DJ Hicks, the upside there, all the transfers you brought in, Cassius Howell, all over. I think this defense is going to be great. And I also think it's a extremely well-coached defense. And that stuff matters. That stuff matters. Being talent is great, but you also got to be well-coached. Your coaches got to have the X's and O's. And I do believe that Texas A&M's coaching staff does possess that. So I'm super anxious to watch this defense go at it on the field. I think this defense is going to be really, really good. And I think the upside that they possess there is extremely high. So I'm really excited to see this unit on the field as a whole. I think it's all going to come together well. I think the concerns with linebacker depth and secondary are going to work themselves out to where this unit ends up being this defense ends up being really good. I think it'll be a top handful defense in the SEC and potentially this will be a top 15 defense in college football with a chance at top 10. I do feel very confident saying that. We're going to talk a little bit. I'm convinced that Texas A&M is going to win 9 football games. I'm going to try my best to convince you coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. I'm a believer, ladies and gentlemen, now that Texas A&M is going to win 9 football games this season. The Aggies are an extremely underrated team heading into this season. It's getting to the point where like it's starting to become crazy to me just how underrated Texas A&M is this year. I think the Aggies are one of the best, of the best underrated teams. I just look at this Texas A&M team and I say to myself, they are going to outperform expectations this year. I am a full believer in that. I think that this team is really, really, really good. And I think a lot of people, I'm telling y'all, believe me or don't believe me, Texas A&M fans on this one. But I just think there's a negative bias toward Texas A&M. I think just people don't like Texas A&M. People don't understand Texas A&M, you know what I mean? People that aren't an Aggie. And I think it leads to people just undervaluing and underrating this team. For so long, it was overvalued. And now I think that's flipping in the other direction. But I do believe that Texas A&M now has the coaching staff necessary in the roster still to overachieve. So I'll tell you, I am a full-on believer that this team can win 9 football games this year. Now, once again, when I say that, I have to continue to reiterate that this team is playing a super manageable schedule. If Texas A&M was playing Ole Miss and Alabama and Georgia, this conversation wouldn't be the same. The schedule is extremely manageable, as I often say. You play all of your challenging games at home. Your road games, your ones that aren't Florida and Auburn, I think are very, very winnable. And I still think that both Florida and Auburn are winnable football games. So I think you're the better team in both of those games. So the reason I'm high on this team and the reason I believe the upside is there is because of the schedule. I'm not saying this roster is not good. I'm not saying this coaching staff isn't good, because I believe both of those things are true. I think it's a great roster and I think it's a great staff. I look at this schedule and I go, Texas A&M is going to win 9 games this year. I really believe it. The way it works out, once again, if they were playing Georgia instead of South Carolina and Alabama instead of Mississippi State and Ole Miss instead of Arkansas, we would be saying, is Texas A&M going to make a bowl game? Like, it would be a very different conversation. But Texas A&M is in a very lucky spot where they play a manageable schedule. And that is why I am a full believer that this team can win 9 football games. And I'm starting to believe that some people, not all, some college football fans are starting to come around to that being a possibility. I think for a long time, no one believed that. And people are starting to look at this schedule. It was like, y'all will have already heard it. I'm pre-recording because I'm in Spain, obviously. But when I talked to Zach Blackerby of Locked On Auburn, y'all listened to that show and heard him say, oh, wow. Like I said, I think Texas A&M can win 9 games. And he went, what? And they looked at the schedule and he goes, man, Texas A&M maybe can win 9 football games. And I told him, I said, yeah. So like, when you look at this schedule and look what Coach Elko has done roster-wise, it's hard not to buy into the hype that it is possible for the Texas A&M Aggies to win 9 football games this season. That's going to do it for this Monday here at Locked On Aggies. I really, really appreciate y'all tuning in. So the plan is, today is Monday the 15th. I get home on Wednesday the 17th. I will have brand new episodes. If there's any recruiting news, whatever it is, all of it will be on the 18th and the 19th. We'll break it down, whatever is going on. Really appreciate y'all bearing with me while I was out of town here. This is my last episode out of town. I'll be back. Thank y'all so much for sticking with us, tuning in here. Really, really appreciate y'all. Hope everybody has an outstanding rest of their Monday. And we will see you on Thursday right here at Locked On Aggies.